Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Live Tech Support with RME USA with Jeff Petersen. My name is Derek Padala, and we welcome you. For those of you that are here for the very first time, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions of our team, whether you're an RME customer and currently using RME, or you're considering RME and you just want to know if your setup is going to work or what have you. So, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Derek? It's been a heck of a week already, and it's only
Yeah,
Wednesday.
we're running a mile a minute here between
Yeah.
helping customers and helping dealers, so maybe a little frantic. So as I understand this week, we've been getting a lot of inquiries online about expanding your studio, expanding
hmm
your inputs and outputs with your Babyface or your Fireface or Digiface or Mattyface. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that. And again, just to remind everybody, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, just enter your questions in the chat, and we will address them here on air. And we'll also give you out. You can email us or contact us through the syntax.com website or rmeusa.com, and that's rme-usa.com. There's a support tab.
Yep.
So,
and yeah, we get a ton of inquiries through there, and we try to help you as quickly as possible. There's a sort of a generic form you can fill out there and put your questions in, or you can email us directly, info@syntax.com. Speaking of the expansion thing, that's kind of one of the unsung, things that RME is doing that not everybody else is quite up to, is building in a lot of expansion capability on the sort of all-in-one interfaces. So like the Fireface series and Babyface, they can grow to be a full studio interface if you add on some products via digital connections.
yeah, I actually am doing that today. I have an RME 12 mic, and I'm actually trying to use my mouse and do all kinds of clicks here while I'm doing this live stream. So forgive me, I'm a little slow.
Yeah, well, the 12 mic is a 12-channel mic preamp with A to D converters. Really super high-quality mic pre's, very clean, transparent. What you hear is what you get kind of preamp. As you'd expect from RME, it's measurement quality, lab quality gear. But it's kind of unusual. Normally, RME's preamps are 8 channels. And the units like the Fireface, for instance, have 4 channels of mic pre's in addition to the line-ins. But this model goes a little beyond because it's got a little different kind of capabilities. It's primarily made as a network preamp. So it's got the AVB networking ports built in over on the left side on the rear panel. And with that, you can add these onto your AVB network and then send those 12 channels of inputs anywhere in your AVB network. In addition, you've got MADI built in and ADAT. So those are going to be what you'd hook up to a Fireface, for instance. So, I think, Derek, do you have a UFX Plus with this?
I do. It's being used right now.
Okay.
By my kid's school for a project. So
good.
I hooked up I'm sharing the 12 mic screen on the stream right now, so you guys should be able to see this.
Yep.
I have 8.1 output connected to my Babyface, so I can use 8 of the 12 mic inputs. Normally, I would connect this to, like Jeff said, either a Digiface Avb or a Mattyface product or a Fireface, and then I have obviously access to all the channels. But what I want to show you is the actual GUI of the 12 mic. I have a USB cable connected, so you'll notice on the back there is a USB port. And since I'm using it with a Babyface, I can just run a USB 2 cable from this port to an available USB on my MacBook Pro. It happens to be what I'm using today. And then just pop in the IP address. And I can get that IP address off the screen of the 12 mic. It's also in the manual for those of you that like to read manuals. I'm not one of those people.
I do.
And yeah, you have to. And this is the GUI. I mean, it's a very powerful GUI. So in fact, if I kind of walk you through, let me share my entire desktop. You can actually see.
Let's just clarify too, that USB, that is not a connection to a computer for recording on this particular model. It's not a USB interface. It's a standalone mic pre. So that USB port is really just our way into the unit for firmware updates, configuration changes, routing. You can do all that stuff through an AVB network if you have it set up, but if you don't, then the USB connection gives you the this sort of virtual network port that talks to the 12 mic.
Yep. So I have the ADAT out from the 12 mic going into the ADAT input of my Babyface. So you can see on my Babyface Pro, I have the normal analog inputs here. I have them separated, and then I have my 8 digital inputs separated, and of course I've renamed my inputs to be 12 mic. Now I'm squashing the screen just so you can also see my web browser at the same time, and you can see these are my 12 mic inputs on the 12 mic, and I'm using a basic microphone, and there's my level, and it's actually routed. We get into the routing features of the 12 mic, which is pretty cool. You can see that I have the 12 mic inputs going to the ADAT outputs, and ADAT output 1 is going into ADAT input 1. See, signal flow gets really convoluted quickly.
Sure does.
Even I get tongue twisted, and then there it is. And in Totalmix, I see it, and then I'm routing Totalmix to my main out, which is feeding all of you on this live stream via loopback. But what I love about this GUI on the mic pre is you can also route your mic inputs to the headphones, the MADI. You got 128 channels of MADI. So if I wanted to take this literally with my routing option, I can just grab it and go to, a MADI input just like that. And that's how fast you can route audio. If I wanted to go, if I was using it on an audio network, say AVB, I could do the same thing and go over to one of the AVB inputs. Now, AVB is a whole nother realm of configuration and setup with streams and channels and streams. That kind of goes beyond the scope of today. But you have tons and tons of flexibility with this mic pre. And the AVB tool, which is another product you will find on the website, essentially is the same thing, just 4 microphone preamps, but it's the same web GUI, works the same way. There's a couple of small details that are different, like there's no ADAT out, and there's analog 3 and 4 out, but it's same web GUI to get around and do lots of things with. So it's
AVB is very promising for the future, but I just want to point out, that you can, by routing these to multiple outputs, you have a lot of redundancy capability built in right here. So we can send that signal to the MADI output, the ADAT output, and the AVB network all at the same time and be capturing on 3 different computer systems or sending the signals to different locations through all those different places.
Yeah, and you can save presets.
It works like a splitter in the digital world.
And as you can see here, you have presets, so you can save these setups for tracking a certain type of situation and et cetera. And if you're using an AVB, you don't need the USB cable. You can actually just access this GUI through the IP side.
Yep.
So that's a whole nother cool thing about it. So anyway, that's expanding your studio with the 12 mic as an example. We also make a very prominent microphone preamp called an Octamike Xt, which can be used with ADAT and MADI and expand that way as well. And
now that one does have a USB port that actually works as an interface. That's a little unusual.
Oh, that's a good point,
The Octamike Xt has a class compliant USB, which will show up as a 24-channel input and output on your computer if you're using a Mac or Windows 10. It'll even work with an iPad directly, not with that full channel count, but with some of them. So that, it's a great pair to match up with any MADI system or any Fireface model. Pairs up really nicely. Fully digitally controlled mic preamps. You can even remote control them, sort of like what Derek was showing you with the 12 mic, but there's a different app, and that's all done with MIDI remote control. But yeah, that USB port here is useful all on its own, not just for firmware updates and control.
Yeah, I've used that MIDI controller and connected the MADI port to my Fireface and done with the MIDI over MADI feature, and it's a GUI that you download from this download section, I believe, right? I'm on the RME site should be able to see that on this.
Oh, the
live
MIDI
stream.
Remote app is a separate app, but you can
Yep.
also integrate it right into Totalmix, so your channels will show up
Yeah, and
just
that's
like they're
how
the
I run it.
built-in mic pre's. Yep.
Yeah, I actually used the Fireface and the Octamike as a live mixer. It wasn't really designed for that, but I like to take advantage of the compression and the EQ, and I use Totalmix Remote and do a 14 input remote mixing thing.
That's it works great, right? Seamless. Yeah. A little setup on the front end, but once you got it, it's pretty rock solid and works really well. RME gives you a lot of different ways you can control things, especially in Totalmix. You know, you have obviously direct GUI control. You have MIDI remote control, which is using Mackie protocol or even just simple MIDI commands on CC1. Then there's OSC, which is open sound control. You can build your own sort of control surface on an iPad with Touch OSC app for iPad. And then the last one would be the RME's own Totalmix Remote App. So what's cool with RME's Totalmix Remote is, you know, you saw Derek's Totalmix on his screen, and you would have an exact copy of that on an iPad or on another Mac or Windows computer. As long as it's on the same network, you'll just have like a second controller of Totalmix. It's another copy of it that you're using. So works out great. You know, if your Fireface is in the studio and you're in the drum room, you just bring your iPad or an old laptop over and run Totalmix Remote on there, and it'll connect through your Wi-Fi network. Really slick.
Yeah, I'm actually just checking all the social media sites for any
Touch OSC app for iPad.
questions.
And then the mute. There we go.
Oh, there we go. I'm planning to move to AVB, but my UFX2 doesn't support it, right? Correct. You can integrate AVB and the UFX2 in a lot of different ways, but there's no native AVB on there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, boy, what would even be the way to do that at this point? ADAT connectivity or SPDIF.
Or with one of our converters, like even the 12 mic, you would have.
That's just
that's
outputs.
not ideal.
Yeah. I think you know, basically you probably replace the UCX with something like an AVB tool, which will give you some local IOs. And then, you know, you'd need a Digiface Avb as the interface.
Right. Now, the next question is there a similar interface that supports AVB than the UFX2, and that would be the Digiface Avb?
Yeah. In the future, I'm sure there'll be some stuff coming. This is sort of our first round of AVB product. So, you know, this is going to live alongside of Maddie for now, but eventually probably the idea is that eventually in the future that will replace Maddie as your, you know, high channel count, long distance run destined.
Yeah,
there you go. Derek's got the Digiface Avb.
Yeah, this is the Digiface Avb. So it has USB 3 on the back. Plug that right in, your USB 3 port on Mac or Windows. And there's your AVB port and word clock.
And a headphone out. And that'll give you 128 channels in and 128 channels out at some sample rates anyway. And, you know, higher sample rates sometimes cause some channel count changes. But, yeah, up to 128 in and 128 out, which, you know, should be enough for most studio applications.
Yep. Next question, kind of a bait question, because I got to be careful how I answer this. Really need a UCX update. It still uses Cirrus Logic converters from pre-2010 and Firewire 400. There's some stuff in the works. We'll be announcing later this year.
So, you know, this is not unusual, though. When RME builds interfaces, the typical production run span is about 10 years. So, you know, it's about due. Let's just put it that way. Rarely, if there's some good reason to, they will do a upgrade sooner, like the Babyface Pro to the Babyface Pro FS. They wanted to take advantage of the new FS clock when they had to redo the whole thing anyway. So that's, you know, kind of a rare early upgrade. But yeah, you know, like the Fireface 800 was in production from 2004 to 2017, something like that. So long-term support and long-term production is kind of part of the game here. We build a product that we expect to still be valid in 10 years.
Yeah, and that UCX is used in a lot of test and measurement applications,
Absolutely.
which calls for very high precision audio recording and playback. So
Hmm.
um, even though it's been out, like Jeff said, as long as it has, you're still in amazing company and performance.
Yeah, just because it's old doesn't make it perform any worse, right? So there are new chips that have a little lower latency and maybe a little better specs, but it's not just about the chip, right? It's
Yeah.
the whole design of the system, and also is it something where you have drivers that are working and driver support in the future, and is the have a connection type that is available in 10 years?
I would
That's
add to that. There's a Matthias Karstens put up a great video on Steady Clock and Steady Clock FS,
oh,
and
yeah, that's
in that
fantastic.
video, he uses the UCX in one of his examples of how, and this is to Jeff's point, it's not just the chip of the converter, and talks about sidebands and jitter
Hmm.
caused by bad clocking. So the UC and UCX have steady clock in there, and he compares that to even more current converters. CX still outperforms it,
Yeah,
and a
it's
big
pretty
reason why that
amazing.
is the clock.
Hmm.
So yeah, to Jeff's point, older isn't always worse, or newer isn't always better.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and that's still
Just
one of our best sellers, the
yep.
UCX.
Yeah, and I'm cruising through all those social media sites just trying to grab questions. I'm not looking at the Latin America site, but we have quite a few viewers
I don't
today.
speak Spanish, sorry.
We got 2 on Syntax LATM. So Jeff, why don't you tell us what kind of calls are you getting these? Are you still getting a lot of calls on
Oh,
installation of drivers?
yeah. I mean, look, since High Sierra, Apple's put some roadblocks in around the system security, which is a good thing overall, but it does cause consternation for the end user when they don't understand why their driver is not installing correctly. So RME has put up a page. When you go to your downloads page, you'll see it right there. There's a link to how to install on High Sierra, Mojave, Catalina, and then a separate one for Big Sur. There you go. So that red bar right here, yep, that's your. If you click on that, that'll take you to the Big Sur instructions. If you just take a look there, there's this whole thing where you have to go through the security and privacy section to unblock any third-party driver. So this is not just RME. People are having the same challenges with any sound cards they're trying to install that are not just class compliant.
Right.
So that's been a lot of time, and I get calls every day from people who are buying used RME product and need help with getting drivers and that sort of thing. Of course, we're happy to help. We're happy that those older products are finding new homes instead of landfills. We really, so we want to support those users who have purchased secondhand. That's one interesting aspect here is because the driver support is so good and the long-term firmware updates and driver updates, RME products do tend to stick around. Like I said, the Fireface 800 from 2004, still hundreds, maybe thousands in service.
Yeah, and I'm just want to add to that too. In addition to the driver and security thing, especially on the Mac side, well, it's really 2 points. Number one, there's not a lot of audio interfaces right there that work with the Mac OS 11.
Yeah.
So hands applaud to RME for just being really one of the first.
The first, as far as I'm aware. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always careful to claim a fact. I want to make sure I'm, giving myself a little margin of error in case there's
sure.
some obscure brand that's out there. But if you have a new Mac, RME is going to be a great choice. The other thing I wanted to share is because we do get a lot of people asking about what we're including when you buy an RME interface from Canada, US, or South America. This whole registering to get your free software that we include. This is not a global offer. This is strictly in North and South America. But
right, this is by Syntax.
Yeah, so when you go to the RME USA website and you go to support, which is found right here at the top, go to project registration. And I know it's a little confusing. There's kind of 2 places to register. Your basic registration is right here, and you fill that out, and you get your normal tech support and warranty stuff. Jeff, what's our warranty? Is it 2 year?
2 years on everything from your original purchase.
Yep. And then if you bought a Babyface or Fireface, basically, Babyface last year or Fireface this year is kind of when we started it.
Mm-hmm.
You go here, register your plug-in bundle, and this is where you want to register.
Yep.
And the email will go to one of our colleagues, and this is done by a human being.
Keep scrolling,
she
please.
will actually look at the receipt, make sure everything is legit, and then you will get an email on how to download your plugin. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. You can see
you got to go way to the bottom of the page to get that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yep, right here.
Yep.
And you're going to upload your receipt. You're also going to know that we're running a promotion right now. If you buy an RME Fireface unit in the month of March, again, this is for U.S. and Canadian and South American customers, you would get a free ARC USB. 9 times out of 10, that's going to come directly from the dealer. There are instances where the dealer didn't have it and it'll come from us, but more often than not. So we want to make sure everyone knows that's going on.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That ARC USB is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I love that thing because I don't see a good picture of it, but you can tie these buttons to everyday functions that you use in Totalmix, and
fully
use
programmable.
Yep, very programmable. So
we did get a question on YouTube from Lower Freak 2. He'd like to buy a UCX to go with a Babyface Pro, and is looking for tips regarding using them together with an ARC and Totalmix. It's going to be connecting via ADAT and wondering about Totalmix routing. Looking to replace a converter he's not too happy with right now. So yeah, if you have the Babyface Pro, you can certainly add on a UCX and use it. I would say effectively standalone, but you could connect it to the computer as well for control capability. But the idea in my mind, the best way would be the Babyface is your interface, and then you're expanding that with ADAT, and that ADAT expansion is through the Fireface UCX. So the Babyface connects USB. The Fireface UCX would just be hooked to the Babyface ADAT input and giving you 8 more channels of analog in and out. You can actually control the UCX pretty well just from the front panel. That single knob gives you access to mic gains and output levels and things like that.
And that would all come in here, right, Jeff?
Yep,
right?
That'll just come in on your your ADAT channel inputs on your Babyface, and when you're sending out, that's going to be the 4 on the bottom row there, the ADAT 1 through 8. And that would then feed to the UCX channels, 1 through 6, plus headphones on 7, 8.
Yeah, and you just click on where you want that to go. And again, it always confuses people when things are stereoed. So just if you're thinking in terms of individual channels, this is what Jeff's referring to. So you can, if you want to send something to the UCX ADAT input 2, you would just click on this in your Babyface, bring up whatever, and now that's going there.
I also wanted to say on the UCX, there's a section when you're not connected to USB. If you go into the menu, there's a menu labeled SU, which means setup. And if you go into that setup menu, you can load a preset that is A to D, D to A converter mode. And that will do the routing in the UCX for that. So analog in comes to ADAT out, and opposite, the ADAT input goes to analog out. So it's pretty seamless. You set it up that way and load that preset. It's going to work just as you'd expect. And then down the road, if you need to pull it and connect it to a computer, you just plug it in and it'll work as expected.
I forget, on the UCX, is input 1 and 2 the mic pre's?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the line inputs are on the back, and that's 3 through 8.
That's right. Yeah. Well, actually, 3 and 4 are also on the front. Those are instrument or line level inputs, so you can plug in a guitar or bass. They have a high Z mode, and then you got the 4 more inputs, channels 5 through 8 on the back panel.
Gotcha. These are great questions. I'm
yeah, and Lower Freak says, I do struggle with Totalmix routing, but it should be simple. And it is. I mean, it can be a little confusing, but once the light bulb clicks, it's pretty straightforward. And I'm happy to help if you're struggling. Give us a call. like to turn that light bulb on for people.
I get that question a lot too at a trade show. If someone will walk up to me and go, "I love RME. It sounds great. It's the most amazing thing, but man, you got to explain Totalmix to me." So I'm going to tell you what I tell people in 60 seconds, and hopefully right now you'll have that aha moment. So in Totalmix, there's a mode called submix and free mode, and I'm highlighting it with my mouse. And I always tell beginners, start with submix mode.
Yeah.
And you have your inputs up here. So this is my mic input because I'm using the 12 mic right now. Normally my microphone is plugged in here.
Yep.
And I want you all to hear my microphone. So analog 1 and 2 is what you're all hearing me on. And I just click that and bring up whatever faders I want to feed to this output that I'm highlighting. And if I want to hear my microphone in my headphones at a different volume, I click on the headphone out, and you can see I have it lower. So by clicking on an output, that's the mix.
Yep.
So when I click on analog 1 and 2, you all are hearing the mix right here. And when I click on 3 and 4, you're just hearing, I'm just hearing in my headphones this and this. The middle row confuses everybody because it has the same labels as the inputs and outputs. I just tell people, look, this is a software playback. This is what you can address in your DAW.
Yep.
It gets more confusing when you talk about iTunes and YouTube audio, and we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, you will see, depending on the software, it might say Babyface Pro 1 and 2. It might say Analog 1. Every software I've noticed a little different.
Some software just calls it numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
But most people, you'll send your DAW, the mixer of your DAW, to the first Babyface, and that's where it'll show up. And then if I open up another piece of software like S-Gear, which is the guitar simulation software, I can choose the 3 and 4, and I can name these. I can click on that. Here, let me do that. I could double click on that and label it, Reaper, which is I'll just call it DAW. And then I can click on this and maybe call that Logic. So because it's a multi-client interface, so I can run Logic and another DAW at the same time and have the audio from each software source come into this middle row separately. And then how I want to hear that in my headphones is this, and how I want to hear it in my studio monitors is this. And so once you get the concept of click on an output, obviously make sure it's up here, and bring up then that's the routing. Well, most people get it after that.
My shortcut is every output has its own mixer.
Yep.
Right? So you start by clicking the output, and then you bring up the source that you want to send to that output. So you're looking at different layers as you're clicking on a different output on the bottom row. So now we're on the ADAT2 layer. Yep. And now we're on the ADAT3 layer, and we can make the mix for that. So it starts with selecting the target. If I plug in a guitar, where do I want to hear it? Well, I want to hear it in my headphones. So I click on phones, and then I bring up the input signal.
Yep. Yeah.
It's that easy.
Yeah. If my guitar is plugged into input 3, exactly. So it starts to make sense. As soon as you, and you know what? The other thing I want to tell you is when you click on an output, notice every has that output labeled.
Yep. On the bottom of the channel strip.
You can look anywhere on the GUI and go, oh, ADAT8 is what's selected in the bottom row. Oh, it's now ADAT6. As soon as you go to free mode, it's
hard
a whole nother
mode.
ballgame.
Yeah, I call that hard mode, but that's the old way.
That's the mode where you have to select the output here.
Yeah.
But I'm going to stay away from that for today. Because
confusing.
Most of the time, I don't see a need for free unless I'm using like a massive channel count and I don't want to scroll down to the bottom row.
Yep.
That's kind of a little tip for everybody. Let's see if there's any other questions. I don't see anything. All right. Well, we were just about out of time anyway, so I want to thank everyone for being here. If you do have questions, I would simply go to the RME USA page and click support, and you can ask your questions there, and Jeff more than likely be the one that gets back to you. So I want to thank everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful and safe Wednesday.